Aloha, and welcome to this week's video. So this week I'm going to be finishing the Taiaha, which is the Maori battle staff. What I'm going to be working on today, or rather in this video, is I'm going to be finishing the Arero, as well as all of the finishing touches and insetting the eyes on the opoko and everything else. So the Arero is the tongue, or this blade that's protruding out. What I'm doing here is I'm just sanding it off. It was very rough before, so I'm getting it a little bit smoother, only sanding it down to about 120, or no, I think I sanded it down to 220. And then I'm going to be drawing some design layouts on the Arero and carving those in. The chisel that I'm going to be using for these is going to be a V chisel. Before I start with that though, I'm just going to draw in a center line, just so that when I draw the design pattern on it, I can mirror the image relatively well. I'm going to freehand this one actually. So after I draw the center line, I'm going to freehand the design pattern. It's going to be a mirrored swivel or swirl pattern. I thought about doing a template or a stencil, but I felt like it would be a little bit more natural to do a freehand design into here. I did take my time with it just to try to get, you know, the different loops to be a similar size or as close as the same size as I could. And then after I finished sketching it out, carved that pattern out with my V chisel. I wasn't actually entirely sure how this was going to work out. I don't normally do these types of intricate design work. And so I'm making it as complex as I think I can, while still keeping it simple enough so that I don't completely ruin it. Last thing I want to do is just completely botch it and then ruin the entire piece. I don't know if I'd have a way of fixing it if I just completely ruined this section of it. And so you can see here I mounted it to my vise, or I mounted it with my vise so I could kind of keep it floating above the ground, and I'm just taking my time here. It's hard to tell because I've sped up the footage, but I've sped it up quite a bit. I think I have it sped up to about 800 times. This is taking me quite a while to get in the curves and to get it to depth. And so what I kind of decided to do is I was just going to rough it in, and then I would go back and forth and making the grooves deeper and deeper and cleaner, so that when I sanded the top section of it off, that I wouldn't, you know, lose any of those grooves, and that everything would kind of meet together and look really well. I haven't done this very often, and so it was a little bit of a learning curve. And then the piece of koa wood I had here definitely made it even more challenging. So you can see the figure that's in the wood. You've got these lighter sections, lighter sections to darker sections to lighter sections. The lighter sections in this piece are actually less dense. They're a softer koa. And so as I would transition from that lighter section to the darker section, I'd go from a softer koa to a harder koa, the wood, a harder wood. And so it made it really challenging to keep the lines smooth, because, you know, I'd be able to chunk out a section really easy, and then all of a sudden I'd get hung up, and then chunk out a section and then get hung up. And so that's why I'm choking my hands up so far up on the bit here, on the chisel, is just so I can control it as much as possible with the amount of force that I'm putting into it. You don't really see it from here, but I did jump a couple times where I pushed it forward. Luckily I never gouged it so deep that I couldn't sand that off or repair it. But that's why I ended up taking so long, is just those different alternating sections, those darker to lighter to darker sections, were harder to softer woods. And so it was a real pain. Now that I have the arero, the tongue, fixed or mostly roughed in, I'm just going through and cleaning up some more of the upoko. I didn't quite finish it. I got it about 90%, maybe a little bit more. Now that I've got the arero in a spot where it's looking a little bit better, I actually narrowed it down a little bit too. I'm going to be doing the rest of the cleanup work on the whole piece. There's some burn marks from when I was roughing it in with the angle grinder. I'm going to be getting all of those out, as well as cleaning up the connection points, and then obviously making the grooves just a little bit deeper and a little bit more well defined. I spent a lot of time on this section of it. I was really trying to make it as clean as I could. I felt like I did a pretty decent job. Again, I'm not an expert at this type of work. I definitely am out of practice on this. I definitely could use quite a bit of more time and study on getting better at fine carving. And if anyone in the comments, if you like to give me suggestions, if I'm doing something horribly wrong, by all means let me know. every little bit helps. We're all learning. So all I'm doing here is finishing cleaning up the eyes, and then I'm going to be sanding it off. It had some pretty deep burn marks from when I had roughed it in previously, and so I needed to sand all of that out, clean it up. The upoko here, the head, is not going to be perfectly sanded just because of all the grooves. It's just mostly sanded. Once I oil it up with the tongue oil, it'll really come together nice. So right here I'm just making sure that everything is mostly good. I'm really just trying to get rid of all the burn marks and then all of like the little rough edges, so getting it a rough sanding. I am going to be sanding it down to 320, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put in the eyes. So I have the whole piece sanded down to 220, and before I get to 320, I'm going to put these eyes in. What I did is I mixed up some epoxy and mixed some wood shavings in with the epoxy to kind of fill in the gaps around the eyes. Most of the eyes I got a pretty snug fit. I think one of them was a little bit loose, but that's where the epoxy comes in, mixed in with the wood shavings, is it kind of hides those gaps. It does a pretty decent job of hiding the gaps, and so you get a cleaner inlay. Originally I was going to do an inset. So an inset is where the material that you're insetting sticks out, protrudes. I decided to do an inlay to where it's flush with the wood, just because the piece of wood here had a curvature to it, and so I thought it would just look better if it was round all the way around. So just kind of the wood seamlessly went from this on the same plane from the wood to the pearl. I am using a white pearl. The white pearl just beautifully contrasts the dark koa. I was really pleased with this. I kind of debated back and forth between using white pearl and like abalone, where it has like all those different colors, but the contrast here on the white pearl to the dark koa really turned out beautifully. I was actually really excited to sand it and get it ready for tongue oil, just to see that contrast pop even more. So I let it sit for a whole day, just to give it time for that epoxy to sit and to really cure. And now I'm coming back and I'm going to be sanding away all of the remaining epoxy, getting the inlays flush with the surrounding wood, and then sanding up the rest of the Taiaha body. Once I finish this part here, one of the things that I needed to be careful with in sanding the 320 on the arero, the tongue, is I didn't want to sand too deep, so that I removed some of those markings. But I had them set in pretty well, so I wasn't too worried about it. Here I'm just cleaning up, sanding the whole piece down to 320. I've already shaped it. I've already removed all the material I'm going to remove. And so before I oil it, I just want to check its balance and its feel one more time. I don't want to have to sand it again after I oil it. So I'm checking it first. It's a little bit back heavy, just a tad bit, but that's okay, because when I add in the lashing and the feathers, it's going to balance out really well. So it's in a really good spot. I'm really pleased with it. And I've been kind of waiting the entire time. I mean, every piece I make, my favorite step is oiling it. And the oil I use is not a colored oil. It does add a little bit of a darker tint to the wood, so lighter sections will darken up a little bit. Darker sections don't seem to change too much. They kind of just pop, but you can see here the lighter section gets a little bit more of a golden hue. But the tongue oil is not a stain. It really just brings out the natural grain. It's by far one of my favorites. I've thought about using other finishes, but I've just loved the tongue oil so much that I stick with it. Oiling this piece took a really long time just because it's a really large piece. The body of the Taiaha, the tinana, is the body. The blade section of it was my favorite part. An absolutely beautiful curl you could see there. And then oiling in the upoko and the arero, the head and the tongue, was a lot of fun. You could the different grains, the figure really just popped. Look at that. Oh, it looked awesome. I was just unbelievably excited at finishing oiling this piece. So here's that curl that I was talking about, the 3D effect on the blade. The blade section of the Taiaha is the main primary striking section, and then the head, the upoko, were the eyes, and then the tongue, the arero, have a beautiful curl. So here's the finished piece. I forgot to record me lashing the feathers in, but it's really not that exciting. I did get a few different shots. I won't be testing with this piece. I already know what it does. If you'd like to see me testing with my other Taiaha, I'll link that in the video. But I won't be testing with this one. It'll just ding it up and I'll have to sand it down, and so I just don't want to do that. I got a couple of good shots of it. This is inside of my shed, so you have your artificial light, kind of a warm light. And then I went ahead and took it outside to get some natural light. But I really love that dark grain koa, how it comes across the eye from the head to the tongue, from the upoko to the arero. Oh, that was just not planned, but perfect. I wish I could take credit for that being planned. So here's it is in the natural light. Absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite things about koa is that sheen, that natural sheen, that glimmer it has. Here's a close-up of the eyes. They just match perfectly with the overall aesthetic. Absolutely love this piece. Very pleased with how it turned out. I think the total weight came out to about 1.6 pounds. So it's still a little bit heavy, but really not bad for its size. I hope you enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun making it. One of my favorite pieces. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. If there's anything else you'd like to see, please let me know. Mahalo for watching, and I'll see you next time. Aloha.